My grandfather died a sudden traumatic death. He was in his car going over a railway crossing and his car broke down and the train went into him and he died instantly. And my grandmother just completely couldn't cope. And then she tried to kill herself. She took an overdose. And I realized what I always thought for years what traumatized them was losing their dad. But I realized what traumatized them was then almost losing a second parent. I dreamt that you were twisted through seven. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Soberful podcast. And I'm joined again by the wonderful Ann Dowsett Johnston. Hi, Ann.
Hi, Veronica. Lovely to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you. We're just doing this little series of podcast conversations. You might have caught the one that we did last week. Anne and I have a fabulous free 5-day masterclass coming up that we would love for you to come. It starts on Monday, January the 22nd at 1 p.m. Eastern, which is 6 p.m. in the UK. And it's called Sobriety for Women. It's a 5-day masterclass where we go into why you drink, what is emotional sobriety, how to get sober. We bring together both of our, decades of experience and work in this field. And I think it's something that you get a lot out of. So please make sure that you sign up. You can go to soberful.com and sign up, but you'll also see it on our social media. I'm Veronica J. Valli at Instagram. You'll see it on Facebook. If you're on either of our emailing lists, you'll get an invitation. Just make sure you grab a seat because we do expect this one to be oversubscribed and we want to make sure you don't miss out. Okay, so we are going to talk about trauma, women, and drinking today. How to recover from trauma specifically. This is not something that we used to talk about years ago, but it's finally coming out into the mainstream and people are understanding the relationship between an alcohol problem and trauma. Would you agree, Anne?
Yes, I think that's really the case when my mother, who had a significant alcohol problem in the 60s, started to develop her issues. People would say, "What's wrong with Maxie?" My mother's name. Instead of saying, "What happened to Maxie? What happened to her?" And I think it's a significant question, significant difference. And not everyone has trauma, but many people do. And many people find alcohol a good way to self-medicate. And it's always, as a psychotherapist, a question that I ask. I ask a client, I make probing questions, and I'm curious to see if there was a chicken and egg relationship.
What happened to you is just such a profound question. People would do awful things or, they'd have this awful addiction or whatever. And you would know the story of their childhood and you like what they went through. But it's like people have this kind of like, well, once you turn 18, that's all forgotten and everyone's an adult and everyone knows the difference between right and wrong. And what I learned was it's not nobody that when you have a trauma, and a lot of this is in childhood, but not necessarily. It's nothing to do with right and wrong. It's to do with pain and no pain, isn't it?
Right.
And what will get you no pain is substances, and then there's a certain behaviors that go with getting those substances that can get you into a lot of trouble.
Yes, and I think when we frame it that way, we understand that it's a natural thing to do the most expedient action, which is to numb and self-medicate to get away from pain. And we begin to frame it in a way of appreciation and understanding and compassion rather than judgment and criticism.
Yeah, and I want to be clear. It's not, as adults, when we do things that cause harm, like there should be consequences and we have to clean up our messes and we have to pay a price and all of that kind of stuff. It's not excusing bad behavior because someone had a bad childhood. We also have to have our consequences, but it's about understanding and responding to it in a way that breaks the cycle. I mean, that's what we want to do, is we want to break the cycle eventually, don't we?
Yes, really well put. We do put alcohol down our own gullet. We are complicit in that behavior, of course, but there are histories that deserve attention and deserve a nodding and exploring so people have a better understanding of what their habit might be, unconscious as it
Mm.
might be, to reach for something to numb.
Mm. What do you see in your practice? You work with women, right? What do you see mostly?
I work with women. I see a lot of what I would call shut down households where there wasn't
Mm.
an openness to converse. Of course, I see um, childhood sexual abuse. I see rape and other things that happen in teenagehood. But I also see very shut down households where people weren't allowed to communicate and actually don't know how to communicate their feelings and heal themselves. And so my practice is full of women who are learning to find a different way to mend and to communicate with themselves and others. And it's very rewarding.
That that is really fascinating. Shut down households where nobody speaks about the elephant in the room, right?
That's right. That's right. Where it wasn't, as it wasn't in my childhood, which I wouldn't call my trauma, we weren't allowed to disagree. We weren't allowed to crack jokes. We weren't allowed to be free and easy. It was very proper. Those
Mm.
weren't the issues that my childhood trauma was a lot more complicated with violence and an alcoholic mother. But I would say shut down households teach people to be quiet and silent and not explore their feelings. And we need to give language to what's in our souls, what's in our hearts, what
Mm.
we need to be whole in the world. And I work with women a lot on that reality, that muscle, if
Oh,
you will.
yeah. It is a muscle, right? Because we don't, I mean, I grew up in the same, like my whole family didn't talk about feelings. My grandfather died a sudden traumatic death. He was in his car going over a railway crossing and his car broke down and the train went into him and he died instantly.
Oh, no.
And that my grandmother, they had three girls. My mum was the oldest. My mother and I both lost our fathers at the same age, which was interesting. We were both 18. I lost my dad when I was 18. She was
Oh,
18.
my.
And my grandmother just completely couldn't cope. There was a big love affair. Like she, you know, their relationship. It was a big love affair, and this was the 60s. And then she tried to kill herself. She took an
Oh,
overdose, and I realized what I always thought for years. What traumatized them was losing their dad, but I realized what traumatized them was then almost losing a second parent.
of course.
And she didn't die. And back in the 60s in the UK, if you tried to commit suicide and failed, it was against the law and you'd get arrested. But the doctor
Yeah.
was a family friend and he covered it up. But that we were no one was ever allowed to speak about it. I mean, it's just
Isn't
like,
that amazing?
I mean, it's insane, isn't it? And
Yes.
I meet so many people who have their own version of that. That X, Y, and Z happened, and nobody could ever speak about it. And
So
I used
true.
to feel like I was exploding inside.
I bet. I bet. Yes, my grandfather was what we used to call illegitimate. I don't know if we still do. And it was a huge embarrassment in our family. He was a very prominent man, very well known, and no one wanted to speak of that reality. And so it was hidden. And when it came out, my mother was furious that there was any chatter. And I think that there was a lot of what happened, what's wrong with that woman, not what happened to that woman.
Mm,
And in my growing up years, we thought my mother's drinking was a secret. Of course, it was a very open secret. People all knew.
mm,
But we all have secrets. You know,
mm,
we have public lives and private lives, and then very secret lives, and we all know
mm,
what that means.
mm,
And it can lead to very dark realities.
mm,
And it is in the somatic world that I come from in psychotherapy, the most natural thing in the world to reach for a drink, to
Mm,
exit through a substance that is going to comfort you. You know it will comfort you.
mm,
And I don't think we talk enough about the fact that alcohol is very positive and effective in doing what it's supposed to do. We
mm.
tend to demonize it and say it's trouble, but first of all, it's fun. And second of all, it's effective at offering relief.
Anne, that's so true. And I think that's the hardest thing that people struggle with, especially when a lot of my clients are sort of like, it's 5 p.m., right? They work hard, they have, responsible jobs and families. But it's like that evening when that hits. And what they're reaching for is comfort and familiarity and love in a way. It's a warm, fuzzy blanket, isn't it? It just, I remember I had a client said to me, like, I could make it through anything. Like, my family was a mess, but I'd come home. As long as I had that first glass, I could deal with them. I could deal with the kids. I could just deal with them. Oh, I mean, that's the torture of alcohol, isn't it? Because it does. Those first two glasses work in providing the word comfort, escape
Hmm.
so effectively.
Yes. And also, the way you're describing it, a hinge point between the day, work,
Mm,
and home.
yeah,
And people really do love that de escalation, the moment of relaxing. You unhinge your shoulders from your earlobes and you
yeah,
relax, and
yeah,
it is a moment.
yeah.
And a lot of people get caught, as you know, in what will I do with that moment? How will I honor that moment? I'm dealing with clients right now who are practicing with reading, meditation, a little yoga. But these are all learned behaviors. It's much faster to pour a glass of wine.
Mm. And that's I think the hardest part is that bit between recognizing that it's killing you and having to stop and not having it and not
Yes.
feeling comfortable in your own skin. There's a period of time before the reconnection with self that sobriety brings, and that you can find your own comfort, you can work through this stuff and you don't need it. It's that gap, isn't it? It's that period of time that's the hardest, I think, for most people.
Yes, I agree. It's learned behavior, and that is learning. There is a learning curve. You're absolutely right.
I mean, I will always land in the place that we can recover from trauma. I've seen it in
Hmm.
so many people. I didn't have a big. I look at trauma as like, this comes from EFT, big T and small T trauma. Big T trauma is a threat to life or a perceived threat to life. So all kinds of abuse and rape, sexual abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse can be big T traumas. Small T traumas are traumatic, but there's no threat to life or perceived threat to life. It could be like, you're in the middle of fourth grade and you've got best friends and you lived on the same street, and then your family moves across the country in the middle of fourth grade and you don't have any friends, and you go to a really big school and you're bullied and you don't feel like anyone sees you. That can be a traumatic experience. So people kind of struggle. I think, I mean, I had lots of small T traumas that definitely, I mean, the big one is just not being allowed to have my feelings, and growing up with a mother with mental health issues and autism. But I've seen people with really big T traumas be able to get to a place of acceptance, and just it blows me away. It's really, really incredible.
Yes,
Um,
I agree. I agree with you. And I love what you're saying about small T, big T
mm,
traumas. I had both, and I definitely was able through therapy to turn a corner. And it's why
mm,
I'm a therapist, because I believe that it's possible to heal just the way you're describing.
mm,
I think the important thing here to say is you won't heal while you're knee deep in alcohol. It is a twin set. You have to put down the glass and then do your heavy lifting in terms of understanding, appreciating, honoring what happened to you, and finding a way through. But yes, healing is absolutely possible, and in not a terribly long time. I think with some commitment and, as I said, using that bicep of really energetic change, you can turn life around. And I think that's the good news.
What do you feel are what do you think is the most helpful way to help people who've experienced trauma?
I think that there is a navigational tool to, I find my clients really respond to short term gains.
Hmm.
So, in the next 2 to 3 months, we will achieve this. We will find a way to. Often a challenge is they're going to put down the glass. What is going to happen in their household? Is their husband going to? Their partner going to? What is the community climate going to be like in the household? And I think small gains are possible and achievable. And I tend to work that way with a client. So
Hmm.
there isn't this sense of endless, unchanging reality. That's the first thing. I find that clients start seeing that, and there's a bit of a sort of lilt in their voice and a spring in their step, and they're able to take on the next challenge, the next hurdle. What to do when they put down the glass? What will come up? There is that pink cloud for some people and not pink cloud for others, but there will come a time when those feelings that you were trying to, or memories that you were trying to numb, will come up and bite you.
Hmm.
And I find that weekly therapy and the honest relationship, the trust that you can form, is a very, very magical, powerful relationship.
Hmm.
And I love helping women through that first year, second year
Hmm.
of sobriety, where life really can take a turn. And I often say to people, it isn't a matter of turning 180 degrees from what your path is, but rather taking your chin in your hand and making a little pivot, a small pivot, and life can look so different.
I'm really glad you said that because that is one of the truest things I see. And again, this is one of the challenges of early sobriety, and this is why I feel that you absolutely have to have a community and be connected with hopefully some experts and professionals as well. Is when we stop drinking, we're carrying around inside of us a storage container of feelings and emotions that we have stuffed down for years, if not decades. We just haven't. My dad died when I was 18. It was it was unexpected. He was actually 52. He was close to my age. I'm God. Um, and I didn't feel a thing. I just didn't feel
Really?
anything. No, I was in the I had not much earlier had gone into drug induced psychosis and had started abusing alcohol to cope with my panic attacks and Valium. And I just didn't feel anything. And I could tell from the people around me that I needed to feel something and I faked it because I just didn't, I felt so detached from it. And I was about 2 years sober. So this would have been 12 years after he died. I just had this sense of just unimaginable sadness descended on me.
Wow.
And I didn't really, it took me a while, like I was crying every day. And it took a week for me to realize. And all I could think about was my dad. And I spent literally a month like that. I wrote him letters. I played music that he liked. And then it moved. And then eventually it felt different. And that was just in storage, waiting until I took the lid off and was in a. I think there's also something I've noticed in clients. There's some kind of psychological protection mechanism where sometimes it waits until we're safer and on
Yes.
firmer ground, and then it comes out.
Yes.
Have you noticed that?
Yes, I have noticed that, and that was very much my story as well.
Mm.
What an amazing and tough experience you went through.
Mm. Because grief, when you lose someone, it's a necessary process. You can't avoid it. It's a
No.
necessary process. And the same with when we give up drinking. The grief process, it's necessary. It has to be done. There's no avoiding this stuff. We have to. It's about knowing that we'll survive our feelings. That was my biggest fear. I didn't think I would survive them. They used to. I could see them coming at me like a tsunami. Like I could see they weren't here, but I could see them coming, and an alcohol would always stop it. And surviving our feelings, like feeling the full spectrum of human emotion, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and knowing that you can survive them. Because I think as children, if they're pushed down or not acknowledged, there's something, it just makes them more scary than they need to be, if that makes sense.
Yes, I think your image of both the storage container and the tsunami are beautiful, and those images are powerful for me. And when I was 18 months sober, my reality that I had stuffed down depression was overwhelming for me. And at that time, my father died of end stage alcoholism, and he was
Mm.
supposed to be my sober parent. And my partner of 14 years, the man I was to marry, broke up with me all in the same season. And I had a really rough time.
Mm.
And it was a huge victory not to drink. 18
Mm.
months sober, I had enough experience of being sober at that point that I was able to hang on to my recovery. But it took a lot of fortitude and a lot of learning, steep learning. And grief is, it's a crucible, really, a crucible. And we come out changed, come out really
Mm.
changed. To survive it is something. And it's obviously a huge indicator that we have loved. A- And it's always good to remember that, but it can be very difficult, very, very steep curve.
Yeah, I think if anyone's listening to this, and I recognize this, and pretty much every client I've ever worked with, is like the roller coaster of emotions once they stop drinking, because they've just outsourced management to alcohol, and it's a lot of it's a new skill. I think a lot of it is the new skills. I just want to. This is kind of stuff we're going to talk about in the 5-day masterclass as well. But just like having boundaries, being able to like understand what your needs are, and being able to meet your needs, and understand that this too shall pass, and it won't capsize you, and you will survive it, and that you need connection, that we need connection with others. Connection with others is so healing. I mean, that's why the therapeutic relationship is so powerful. Connection, here's the great thing about, when someone's going through this, it's like most of the time people around you can't fix it and they can't change it, but they can walk beside you. And that makes more difference than I think I can put into words. And I don't think people often realize that, is having just people walk beside you while you carry and go through whatever it is.
I remember when I was on my knees and thinking I wasn't going to make it in terms of sobriety, and was encouraged to go to one last meeting and met the woman who would change my life, who's still
Mm.
walking beside me 15 years later. And she insisted that we share a gratitude list every morning. And we have been doing so for 15 years. And the notion when I wake up every day that Gail will be there, that she will
Mm.
be present in my life and know
Mm.
who the names are in my
Mm.
list and why
Mm.
they matter, is such a powerful comfort. And um, it's why we say that community is the opposite of addiction. We say connection is key.
So what got you through? It was. Can you tell me a little bit about what happened?
Yeah, I was the kind of person who had been to rehab and was slipping, as
Mm.
we say. I always think slipping is such an innocuous word. I was returning to alcohol very, very mildly, but yeah, drink here or drink there on every day or every second day. I couldn't get past day one. or I could get to day 3. And that went on for about 10 months. And what was happening was I was surprised by my emotions and decided to give sobriety one last chance. And what happened was I cried all the way through a meeting and a sobriety meeting. And a woman saw me crying, walked across the room, said, "Can I take you for coffee?" I said, "Yes." Said, "Can I take you to another meeting tonight?" "Yes." Said, "Can I pick you up for another one tomorrow?" So there was a lovely bookending here.
Mm.
And then said, the only request in return is that you send me a gratitude list every morning. And what I didn't understand was, in doing so, she would know my life. She would know who the people were and what I was grateful for and why I was grateful for the various people and things, and therefore had an intimacy with me within 6 months, 3 months, 1 month, really. And that connection was everything, because I didn't know other women in my situation other than my mother, who had been
Mm.
a very, very kind of different kind of drinker than I had been, and therefore broke through a lot of denial.
Trauma, the how to heal from trauma is connection. Connection is the biggest piece of that.
It is a huge piece of it. It's a huge piece of it to take whatever is our burden and realize that we are not alone,
Mm.
that in fact others have healed, and that
Mm.
healing is possible.
Mm.
Recovery is possible and healing is possible. And I think if you can break through that notion and really absorb it and live it on a cellular level, then all things are possible. My favorite thing that I tell myself is the universe has a better imagination than I do. And I think, for me, having survived some big T traumas as a child, that notion that life will unfold in a positive way as long as I do my bit is, I mean, bad things have happened. I'm not
Mm.
saying, when I
Mm.
when I get on
Mm.
this territory, people, there's a little bit of, wait a second, bad
Mm.
things happen. Yes, lots of bad things happen.
Mm.
But I think we can heal. I think we
Mm.
can, and we do heal.
Mm.
And it is a beautiful process
Mm.
to watch and to be part of and to partner in as a therapist.
Mm. I've seen it in sobriety as well. I've seen people go through some really, really, really hard stuff. And I've seen people go through really hard stuff and continue to stay sober. When when I was about 6 months sober, my sponsor at the time, her son, he was in his 20s, committed suicide. She was 10 years sober. And I remember my first thought was, oh, well, I'm going to lose her as a sponsor now. And she continued. She died a couple of years ago sober, and then she continued to sponsor with me, and she grieved. And I remember thinking, oh fuck, I'm never ever going to have a reason to drink again, ever. I will never have a reason to drink again,
Wow.
because I have seen someone go through that and not drink, and
Right.
I don't think there's anything really worse.
What an amazing story.
It's a really powerful lesson to have at 6 months. She was wonderful. You know, when we're adults, life stuff does happen. Life stuff happens. And what sobriety gives us and what emotional sobriety gives us is an ability and tools to navigate that differently, I think, isn't it? It has to be navigated.
Mm-hmm. Yes, you're absolutely right. And those are the tools and the toolbox that I work on with my clients in sobriety.
Mm. There is hope. I want people to know there's hope. I've just seen wonderful. I've seen really hard things, and I've seen people go through really hard things, and I've seen people come through and triumphs and be able to turn their past into wisdom and embrace the richness of a life experience and use it to help others. Use it as a way to connect with others, you know? Yeah. Wow. Thank you. That was a really great conversation, Anne. Thank you for joining me today. Uh,
Thank you.
I hope that we'd love to know your thoughts on that. Please, when this gets posted, let us know on social media when you see it go out. And please make sure you sign up for the masterclass that's that's starting on the 22nd of January. We're very excited about it. We've worked very hard on it, and we've talked about it for a long time, and it took a long time to clear our diaries to get to this point. So Anne and I will be back next week for the final episode of our little podcast co-hosting stint here. And then Chip will be back. Don't worry. All right, everybody. Take care. See you next week.